about the advances molecular imaging in vascular disease.
Great. Good morning, everybody. So from what we're currently doing to some more futuristic aspects in keeping with innovation. And by the end of today's talk, I suspect you won't really believe what we're going to be doing and understand that I will try and convince you that we are going to Mars. The aim of my lab really is to try and make the invisible visible. That's our mission statement. And I want to take you through some of the advances in molecular imaging that are coming and currently available. We all know that cross-sectional imaging has revolutionised vascular surgery. Here you can see an approach that we use to measure how much coverage we need for our stents. With endographs now, bespoke planning and bespoke endographs are needed. And this provides anatomical information about the location of the disease, helps with our surgical planning, but tells us no information about the function or biological information about the disease. And why is this important? Well, potentially, this has an ability to personalise vascular medicine. If we could identify which patients are prone to plaque rupture, potentially we could treat the individual patients. If we can find who has myocardial infarctions, go on to develop heart failure, again, interventions can be targeted. Deep vein thrombosis, understanding which patients are most suitable for endovascular therapies, and of course, if we can identify patients who are about to rupture their aortic aneurysms, we could try and treat them early and save millions of lives. So our objective has been to develop and test molecular imaging probes. I'm going to take you through that process that we do at St. Thomas's. Firstly, we identify a target. We then develop and look at the chemistry of that target. We translate that into murine models or experimental models before testing the efficacy of those targets. And then finally, we go to clinical translation before getting regulatory approval, which can take up to 10 years in itself. Our experimental models really include murine models to look at atherosclerosis in either the ApoE or the LDLR mouse. We use the rabbit model to look at plaque rupture. Myocardial infarction is induced through LAD ligature, aortic aneurysms through osmotic pump infusions of angiotensin II, and a surgical model of deep vein thrombosis in which we create stenosis in the IVC. So what's new? Well, over the last decade or so, there's been an increased understanding of the inflammatory processes that really underpin atherosclerosis. We know when plaque ruptures, there's thrombus that forms. We know angiogenesis is imperative to this. Endothelial permeability and dysfunction is perhaps the first hallmark of any piece of atherosclerosis. And more recently, elastin and tropoelastin have been shown to be important in creating fibrosis in stabilizing plaques. So what can we do with this information? Well, active elastin and collagen remodeling is abundant in all of these disease processes. If you look at the top here, this is a histological section that's been taken. This is elastin, this is collagen, and this is prevalent in both atherosclerosis, aneurysm formation, as well as in cardiac disease. And if it's highly abundant, it makes it an attractive target for MRI detection. So what do we do to go and try and do this? Well, first of all, we need to identify what peptide we're going to be doing. So there are multiple candidate peptides that we go through genetic libraries, and then from there we look at leading candidates before we start to synthesize and label these peptides with gadolinium tracers and make sure that tracer is both stable and it works in an MRI machine. And this whole process is an iterative process, lots and lots of failure. Unfortunately, it does cost a lot of money and takes a lot of time. But we have found at least 4 different imaging probes that we're now through to testing, some in a bit more advanced processor than others. Elastin, tropoelastin, and more recently we've been awarded a large medical research council grant to look at both collagen 1 and collagen 3 in the experimental setting. We then inject these probes into murine models. We use a clinical MRI scanner, but inside that scanner we put a little murine model here and a murine coil in which we can look at the information in more detail. So what have we done? Well, this is a paper that we published in Nature Medicine about a decade ago in which we quantified the total amount of elastin in atherosclerotic lesions. And you can see as the amount of elastin goes up, so can you measure the amount of atherosclerosis. So in early lesions, where there's a minimal amount of elastin content, you can see that you have a very, very early atherosclerotic lesion. But extracellular matrix turnover is dysregulated in vascular disease, and we wanted to see if we could take that one bit further. In healthy tissue, you have a lot of cross-linked elastin, cross-linked collagen, but in diseased tissue, these proteins are degraded. Once they're degraded, you get de novo synthesis, in which in particular tropoelastin monomers start to form, and over time, these can then become cross-linked elastin and cross-linked collagen. And this is under enzymatic degradation and processing that goes on. So we've taken that information and in a murine model, and this is the aortic arch of a mouse, and we scan the brachiocephalic artery, and over time you can see that there's an amount of plaque that increases over 12 weeks. And looking at that, we can actually quantify the amount of tropoelastin that goes into the actual plaque itself, similar to what we showed before with the elastin model. But more importantly, we can now differentiate between high-risk and low-risk plaques, plaques that rupture compared to plaques that don't. So using our tropoelastin model, we're able to differentiate which of those high-risk plaques are present. And indeed, even human patients that we've extracted the carotids from, we can differentiate high-risk plaques from those that are not. So what is now visible in 2023? Well, taking together everything that we know, and a lot of this work that we've been doing is taken up to 15 years to do. We can look at the endothelium, we can look at permeability through the endothelium itself, we can look at the accumulation of mononuclear phagocytes, macrophages that are pivotal to the inflammatory process in atherosclerosis. We can target lipids directly. Importantly, and more recently, some exciting work that we've just put to circulation is looking at myeloperoxidase, which is a marker of neutrophils, but also pro-inflammation and redox reactions, apoptosis, neovascularization, and as I rightly said just now, the extracellular matrix in terms of both elastin and collagen. So in summary, today I think we need to think about the shift from anatomical imaging to biological imaging of disease. We don't need to have all of that information because we're getting a lot of information from the anatomy. But by taking a hotspot approach, we can concentrate to understand the presence or absence of this contrast uptake to give us an idea of exactly what might be going on in any particular patient. Signal quantification can be used to stage a disease more accurately and also to monitor therapy in response to these things. There are, of course, less stringent requirements of spatial resolution, motor and correction, but right now we believe that it is possible to make the invisible visible. Thank you very much.